Hey guys, Pike here. This is your endocrine system video number 4, covering the pineal gland, the pancreas, and the thymus gland. So we're going to jump right in with the first gland, and that's the pineal gland in the brain. The pineal gland. It's located in the diencephalon in your brain, that is in the midbrain. And so we see right here, I did this on the last video too. It's weird. Come on. We're just going to wait for just a second. But it is actually posterior to the hypothalamus and the pituitary, so it's farther back in the brain. So there's your pineal gland, and you see the pituitary over here on the left. And then it's just pointing to the brainstem, pons medulla oblongata. And then you have the cerebellum up underneath the brain. And so it's also a very small structure in the brain. But the pineal gland, unlike the pituitary, only secretes one hormone, unlike the 8 hormones secreted by the pituitary gland. So the only hormone secreted by the pineal gland is melatonin, something you probably heard of. Melatonin hormone. Melatonin hormone, the target is really unclear. It could possibly say different things in different places you look. But basically, it just goes out into the bloodstream. So, and its function in the body is to regulate your day and night cycles. And so it's your sleeping hormone. So when melatonin is in high levels in your bloodstream, you are asleep. In low levels, you are awake. And so I know you've probably heard of people taking melatonin supplements to try to trick your body into thinking that it's time for sleep. We normally get melatonin levels to peak when it's dark outside. Okay, and so when it's light outside, melatonin levels will decrease. So that's why it's difficult for people who work the midnight shift from like 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. to try to sleep during the day. Because if there's any light, then it causes melatonin not to be secreted. So people will take melatonin supplements. So it just regulates when you're asleep and when you're awake. But you have to be really careful with supplements because you can definitely take too many. I know there's a lot of things like melatonin gummies and melatonin brownies. Those dosages are not regulated by the FDA, so you have to be very careful. Okay. So that's the pineal gland. It just regulates when we're awake and when we're asleep. Next, we're going to jump into the pancreas gland. Our pancreas. It's located partially behind the stomach, and it goes in between your kidneys. It looks like a little hook, and it's got a tail. Has actually a head, a body, and a tail, but it looks like it's kind of hooked on one end. And it has 2 different types of cells. It's actually called a mixed gland, and it has both endocrine cells and exocrine cells. Endocrine meaning it's going to secrete something that stays inside the body. That's what this whole system is. The endocrine system secreting hormones that stay inside the body. And it also secretes exocrine substances that will go outside the body. So this is going to deal with the digestive system. So we're going to talk about the pancreas again when we get to the digestive system, talk about its exocrine functions. And by leaving the body, I'm talking about that your digestive tract, because you will release waste, okay, as a bowel movement. So here, the part that is endocrine are these little kind of polka dots inside, or little areas inside. They're called pancreatic islets. And then a dude came along and also discovered them, and they're also called the islets of Langerhans. So like little islands, little clusters inside the pancreas. And these tiny cell clusters will produce hormones. And so we have alpha cells and beta cells in these pancreatic islets. And so you have 2 different hormones secreted by the pancreas, and they're secreted by different cells inside these little islets of Langerhans. So you have cells that secrete glucagon hormone, glucagon synthesizing. These are the alpha cells. And then the other hormone is insulin, so you have insulin synthesizing beta cells. So in the pancreas, in these little islands, these little islets of Langerhans, there's the cells there don't secrete both types of hormones. You have certain cells that secrete glucagon and certain cells that secrete insulin, alpha cells and beta cells. Okay? And so in this picture, our pancreas is the yellow structure. And that green right there is your gallbladder that stores bile. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more when we get into the pancreas, into the digestive system. So let's look at the two hormones secreted by the pancreas. So the first one we're going to talk about is glucagon. So you see it has sugar in the name. My screen keeps freezing. Glucagon hormone. Make sure we know which one's hormone, which one's a gland. Glucagon hormone is a very potent hyperglycemic hormone. It's a very potent hyperglycemic hormone in that it is the most important one in raising your sugar in your bloodstream. One molecule of glucagon can cause the release of 100 million glucose molecules into the bloodstream. So it is very potent, very strong. And this one is very sensitive, so you don't may need to be secreted. We have other hyperglycemic hormones. In other words, we have other hormones that will raise our glucose levels in the bloodstream. That's what that means by hyperglycemic, high sugar levels. And those are our growth hormone that gives us sugar in the bloodstream for growth. Thyroxine, which also deals with your growth and development, raising your metabolism. Epinephrine is your fight or flight response, how we prolong that so that you get a rush of glucose. You've heard of people doing crazy things, lifting cars and things like that when they're in a survival situation. And you do that because you get excess glucose so that you can get excess ATP. I thought I took that off. There we go. And another one is glucocorticoids. I called it, in the last video, called it kind of a happy hormone. It makes all our cells happy by giving it just a little sugar. It's like a little sprinkle of glucose out into the bloodstream so that cells will be happy and that will function normally. But this one is the most potent of all of those in raising blood glucose levels. It is under humoral stimulation, meaning that when blood levels of a certain chemical change, this hormone is secreted. And so when there's a decrease in the blood glucose levels, it prompts those alpha cells in the islets of Langerhans inside your pancreas to secrete glucagon. So here the target is the liver, because if you don't have enough sugar, we need to go find some sugar, okay? So like if you don't have enough money, you go to the, or cash on hand, you go to the ATM. So we go to our sugar or our glucose ATM, which is our liver. Our liver stores glucose as glycogen. And so here we have the glucagon hormone. So it triggers the breakdown of glycogen, which is the storage form of glucose in our liver, into glucose. So it's kind of like storing your money in gold bars or something crazy like that, okay? Storing your money in jewels. You're just storing it in a different form. And it also helps the synthesis of glucose from lactic acid. Okay? And so here's where we raise our sugar levels. So if you don't eat breakfast and you have lunch, and so you haven't had anything to eat since dinner the night before, then you have a high level of glucagon in your bloodstream because your sugar levels are extremely low. So then the opposite hormone of glucagon that's secreted by the pancreas, one we've heard about, is insulin hormone. And it's going to have the opposite effect in the body. It is the only hormone in your body from an endocrine gland that has a hypoglycemic effect. And that means to lower your glucose levels. Okay? You have many hormones that raise. Okay? All these that I highlighted up here. There's 5 of them. But only one hormone that's going to decrease your blood glucose levels. So the target for insulin is all of your cells, because if you have too much sugar swimming around your cells in your bloodstream, you're going to target your cells, and the function is to enhance the cell's plasma membrane transport of glucose into the cell, especially in your muscle and fat cells who can take in that glucose and use it. Either store it in your fat cells or use it in your muscle cells to make ATP. So basically what your body does, what insulin does, is it knocks on the doors of the cells, knocks on their plasma membrane, and asks them to take in this extra glucose into the cell, to get it out of the streets and into someone's house, out of the bloodstream and into the cells. And insulin actually just like, hey, if you'll take this off our hands, like get it out of the bloodstream, you can use it. It's really good in converting to make energy. Okay, so it just kind of encourages your cells to take in that sugar to decrease the blood glucose levels, right? So that's all the insulin does. It just asks your cells to take in glucose. So we know that there could be homeostatic imbalances with a hyper or hyposecretion of hormones. Here is where we're going to kind of get into diabetes, the sugar diabetes. We've already mentioned fluid diabetes. That was diabetes insipidus, where you urinate out all your fluids because you have a hyposecretion of antidiuretic hormone. This is where you're going to be peeing out excess sugar. There's so much sugar, so much glucose in your bloodstream that it spills over into your urine. And so this diabetes is called diabetes mellitus. Diabetes mellitus. So I even broke down the words here, the Latin. Diabetes means to siphon away or to pull out. So that's what your urine is. It's being pulled out of your body, let go. And then mel means honey. So you're really just peeing sugar is what that means. And this results from either a hyposecretion of insulin or a hypoactivity of insulin. And that's the two different types. So first we have type 1 diabetes. Okay. Type 1 diabetes mellitus is you are insulin dependent. Your beta cells in your pancreas and the islets of Langerhans, they don't secrete insulin. Okay, they have malfunctioned. They do not secrete insulin. So you have no way, since insulin is the only hypoglycemic hormone in the body, you have no way to get that sugar out of your bloodstream. Okay, so people that have type 1 are insulin dependent. They need to take insulin injections or to be on an insulin pump that is constantly monitoring their blood glucose levels. And then there's type 2 diabetes. Or you would just say 2. Let's do it like that. You can do it both ways. Okay. Type 2 diabetes. This is where you do have insulin. You do have insulin. All right. There we go. But insulin's present, but the effects are deficient. In other words, you have overworked your beta cells in your pancreas. So you're secreting or overworked the plasma membrane receptors for insulin. So you're still secreting insulin and you're still taking glucose and trying to encourage the cells to take it in, but the cells are over it. You've worn out those receptors. They no longer open the door to insulin. They're like, I don't care. Glucose can stay out in the streets. I do not need it, or I will not take it. Because you have so you see this a lot with juvenile diabetes, where a child is eating a lot of sugar over a long period of time, not getting exercise, not burning off that glucose in cellular respiration, making ATP. And so we're storing all the sugar, and your cells are they're basically just over it. Okay, you've worn that receptor down so many times that it no longer accepts insulin. So that is where it is lifestyle. So type 2 is lifestyle, where you have insulin, your body just doesn't respond to it anymore. Okay, and we do see a lot more of this nowadays with kids that stay inside and don't really play and don't have a great diet and exercise. Okay. Type 1 diabetes has a genetic link, so you can see that run in families. All right, that is the pancreas. Now we're going to run into, or go ahead into the gonads. We've talked about these a little bit when we did the anterior pituitary gonadotropic hormones, FSH and LH. And those were tropic hormones that told another gland what to do. So now let's actually do the ovaries and testes as an endocrine gland. So first we have the gonads, but we're going to do ovaries first. So we have the female gonads first. So we know that this is a gland. Remember, I know it's weird to put ovaries gland, but these are glands. Ovaries are paired oval organs that produce our eggs, or our ova. And then I have a picture right here. I know this is a crazy picture, but that's what the female reproductive tract looks like. So you see that we have the ovaries here. That's a fallopian tube. Most books now call that the uterine tube. So they're not actually connected. So that egg that gets ovulated has to kind of be sucked into that fallopian tube. It looks like a little suction cup on the end that will grab it. And then you have your this whole thing that you see, all of this structure, all of this is the uterus. Okay, and all the cervix is just the opening to that uterus. Okay, and then down here you have the vagina. And so those are the ovaries on either side. Okay, so the ovaries, we've already talked about the hormones they secrete, but just to get into it just a little bit, the two hormones, and I'm going to put them in the same line because it's just at different times of the month. So we have the estrogen, and it's a group of hormones, so I'm going to put an S there. It's the estrogens and progesterone. So estrogen and progesterone. So it targets, we're not going to get into the targets because we do have a whole system dealing with the reproductive tract. But for now, it has a lot of targets. So not only are we targeting our reproductive organs that you have in this picture, we're also targeting for our secondary sex characteristics. So we're targeting the breast, we're targeting the skin, the fat, our muscles. So there's a lot of things that estrogen actually affects. The function of estrogen is it's responsible for the maturation of our reproductive organs and our secondary sex characteristics. So the maturation of our reproductive organs is the primary, what's considered the primary sex characteristics, is getting your insides matured. The secondary sex characteristics are more external, more physical appearance. So breast enlargement, widening of the hips, your coxal bones actually pull apart, and you get fat deposits on your hip and axillary and pubic hair. Progesterone actually is helping to promote our breast development and our cyclic changes in our uterine lining to get us ready for pregnancy. When there's no pregnancy, that lining is shed as our menstrual cycle. Okay, so those are the estrogens and the progesterones. Okay. All right, so next. Sorry, I'm getting my daughter out of here. Go. I'm making a video. I know. Not something I want you to be in here for. Go.
I'll say goodnight.
I'll come tell you in a minute. Okay. Sorry, she was looking over my shoulder, and then here I get to this right here. Okay. So next is the male hormones. Okay, so we're on to the gonads. For males are the testes. Okay. So testes, remember these are glands also, or one testis. So here we have one singular testis inside the scrotal sac. And these testes, you learn this in biology, in order to produce sperm. Meiosis for sperm needs to occur at a temperature less than body temperature. So the scrotal sac is outside the abdominopelvic cavity. And then you have something called the epididymis that's going to carry those sperm away so that they can leave the body. Okay? And so the male hormones, there's a group of male hormones, and the group is called androgens. The androgens. The most important of which is testosterone. And these androgens are responsible, again, for your primary sex characteristics to mature the reproductive organs and secondary sex characteristics that define someone as male, such as body and facial hair, enlargement of the larynx, the voice box that men will call their Adam's apple, that deeper voice, a heavier bone structure, increased muscle mass and strength, increased sweat gland secretions. So testosterone actually causes more sweat glands to become active. So all the male characteristics are all controlled by testosterone. Testosterone is not secreted until LH, luteinizing hormone, is secreted by the anterior pituitary. So again, it is not up to our gonads when we go through pregnancy, puberty. It is up to the anterior pituitary and the gonadotropic hormones. Okay? And then last is the thymus gland. And that is the last gland of the notes. This is located deep in your chest, deep in your thorax, behind your sternum. And it is very large in infants and children, but it shrinks throughout adulthood. So yours and mine are pretty small, like shriveled up, okay? It doesn't need to work anymore because the hormone that it secretes is called thymosin. And this one's kind of easy, right? The thymus gland secretes thymosin. So you always know which one this one goes with. Thymosin hormone. And thymosin hormone is going to target our T lymphocytes, our T cells. So this is a cell in our immunity. And so what it does is it matures these T lymphocytes to create the immune response. So what a T lymphocyte is, it's one of our soldiers in the battle against pathogens. Okay, these are just our soldiers, our T cells. And it matures these soldiers. So it takes like little babies and creates actual soldiers that can go to war against these pathogens and win. Okay? So it's really creating our immune response. So we do that in the first couple of years of life, right? And then we don't need that thymus gland anymore. Then we're just trying to maintain those cells. We are not creating them from scratch. Okay? And so look at that. We're done. So that's all of our glands ending in the thymus gland. All right. Talk to y'all later. Pike out.